Welcome back, guys, to another lecture, the T-SQL Toolbox Beginner to Intermediate. In today's lecture, we are going to be covering data types. So the purpose of this lecture is to give you just a brief introduction to data types. I don't want to overwhelm you because there are many existing data types in the SQL universe. Bit of theory, and we're going to jump into a live practical. Okay, so one of the main reasons we want to be specific when we choose our data types is due to table design and practical table design. If we choose the wrong data types or if we choose the wrong size, then this can cause errors and it can cause frustration in the long run. So we want to be, from the get-go, we want to be very specific. We want to be very logical with what we choose for our columns. We want to be using the right data types, and we'll expand a little bit on that in the next slide. But for now, this is just a piece of code. You can play around with this. This is available in the resources. We're making a primary key and a foreign key constraint, and you can do some further research on that if you're a bit unsure on that. And this is just a basic create table statement for two tables. Okay, so data types. Here we go. So this is, as I mentioned, this is not going to be every single data type. It's going to be the main data types that I'm using right now as a data analyst or interacting with the SQL Server. So we've got int, and some use cases for that would be if you're wanting to hold postcodes or certain IDs, you could use that. And on the right here, we can see the different types of integers. And you can do your own research if you want to find out a bit more about that. Now, varchar is a commonly used data type. I use varchar quite frequently. And the beauty about varchar, it's alphanumeric. So it can hold numbers and characters, essentially. And these are all the different types of, if you will, string, because it is from the string family. So these are all the different variations: binary, var binary, etc. Then we've got date time. Now there are many different date time variations, and we can have a specific use case such as a website entry or a updated at clause or created at clause if you want to record the specific date time for that. Please note that SQL Server does have a default format, and here is an example of what it looks like. So I've just inputted today's date, and that's how SQL Server would read that. Now, I've included numeric because if we want to work out a percentage or if we want to hold the decimal value, we can use the numeric data type, or you can use the decimal data type. It's really the option, the choice is really up to the beholder. And one of the key distinctions we need to understand, and this is something I had to wrap my head around, was the precision and scale metrics. So when we're initializing a numeric data type, the precision is the maximum number of decimal digits to be stored. This number includes both left and the right side of the decimal point, and the scale, the number of decimal digits that are stored to the right of the decimal point. So it may make more sense in the subsequent slides. We're going to jump into a practical now. So let's jump into SSMS. Okay, so I've still got dark mode in there. So this is just a piece of code here that I've developed before, a bit of script, and I'll just quickly run through the script. So this drop table statement will drop the table if it exists. This is just to save memory in the server, good for performance. And obviously here's the create table statement. Please note that we need a comma after each statement, if you will, except for the last. And I've chosen the 4 different data types here. Then we've got the insert statement. Please note this is the numeric. These are all string or date, if you will. This is the date here. So let's give that a run. We'll execute that. Okay, so as you can see here, we've got the columns from the output. Now, if I were to change this to, for example, 2. Let's see what happens. So the first, we need to note that the first numeric precision scale. So the scale should be the total numbers on left and right. So we should see 4.52. So we should see only 4.52 in the results. So let's drop this table and we'll recreate it again. So here we go. Let's see what happens. Okay, so now you can see the numeric has changed to 4.52 because we've allocated the scale to only 2. So I'll just show you one more time. If we make that to 4, that should be 1, 2, 3, 4. It should only 4.5236. So let's drop that again, and then we'll run that. 4.236. There we go. Okay. So this has just been a bit of a play around. I'll give you the code. You can play around with that, have a bit of a practical go, reinforce the learning. Another distinction to make is the cast function. Now, as someone interacting with a SQL Server, you are going to maybe come up against some errors data type errors, and SQL Server may ask you to convert to another data type. And this is common, I guess, somewhat common. And let's just jump into the practical of this. So I'm going to... Okay, so we'll drop the table because we've already created that. Okay, so what we want to do is we're going to convert this integer into a decimal point, into a numeric data type. So here we go. So let's create the table first. Then we're going to insert into integer 100. So we've just inserted this value into this column. And then we're going to select all from test. So we can see here that the column number 2, test 2, is an integer 100. But then we're going to convert that into a numeric. Okay, so this is on the runtime. So select cast. We haven't actually altered the table, but effectively what this query is doing is it is retrieving the integer and then converting it into a numeric on runtime from the test table. Now, you may run into other issues or other problems with other data types. This is just a handy function to know, and you should try and get the syntax down pat in your mind, because it is, I struggled getting this syntax down pat because it is a bit weird as numeric, but it's just something to note and something to be mindful of. Another thing I want to show you is that, as I mentioned in the first few slides, if we don't choose the right length, then we could be running into problems. So I'll give you an example of that. So if we put in test3 as length of 5, and we want to insert that into test3, and let's say that we have a string which has a greater length than 5, so we'll put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We should be receiving an error. So let's drop that table. We'll recreate it again, and now we're going to insert into that. So now we are receiving this error. So it hasn't even inserted the value. So this is the reason why we want to be very clear with what precision levels we're setting for our data types. And it may save you some troubleshooting. You may run into some crazy errors in the future. I know I have. And you want to be very specific with the values that you set. Conclusion. So we did a brief overview of the data types in SQL Server. Please note that it's not every single data type, because it would take a while to get through all of them. I've just given you the most practical ones, and there may be a few more depending on the use case, depending on what you're trying to do with SQL Server. and the importance of choosing the data types wisely, because depending on the data types you choose, it can give you frustration or it can make things run smoothly, for lack of a better word. So that's the reason why we want to be mindful of the data types we choose. We did a bit of practice with mock data, and the cast function will be very handy to know, even memorize. I would be memorizing the syntax to that, and wink wink, it may come up in the test or the quiz. So that's it for data types, and I'll see you in the next lecture.